Okay, this study investigates two types of vowel insertion in Turkish. One that splits underlying onset cluster and one that splits underlying coda cluster. So Turkish has words which underlyingly contains onset cluster like train and clip. It could be pronounced as train and clip sometimes. Turkish also has words with underlying coda cluster like fikir and umur. It's clear that these words has an epenthetic vowel because when the word is followed by a vowel, I mean fikir and umur, the vowel between the K and R in fikir and the M and the R in umur is disappeared. So the morphological forms with vowels following such as fikri and umru allow the second consonant to resyllabify so that the cluster is not in a coda, so breaking the underlying coda cluster. It's also clear that this is not a deletion process because of the words which has an underlying vowel like simit and mudur. So we can say simidi and muduru. So the vowel in simit does not delete even after morphological concatenation. So even after we add the possessive suffix. So Turkish also allows certain coda clusters with falling sonority to surface, like ilk and renk. But this is not the focus of our study. So basically the vowel, you see it in fikir and umur, it's epenthetic vowel breaking the bad underlying coda cluster. So vowel inserted in onset cluster are not written, are potentially very short, do not occur in some registers, and vary in these ways from speaker to speaker. Vowels inserted in coda cluster are pronounced as a full vowel. So the vowel inserted in coda cluster pronounced all the time as a full vowel are also written, are not subject to register differences, and do not vary from speaker to speaker. Balak 2016 proposes that there is a difference between the two types of insertion. Vowel inserted between coda clusters is claimed to be epenthesis at the phonological level. Evidence for this, it comes from the agreement in the back harmony and the rounding harmony. As we said in fikir, as we saw in fikir, and umur, the vowel in the underlying coda cluster agreeing with the preceding vowel in the backness and rounding harmony. In contrast, insertion between onset clusters is argued to be phonetic intrusion. So intrusive vowels are argued to be gestureless vowels. So they don't have gesture, like certain gestures, like the full vowels. These vowels, they don't have also a phonological target. So the main question of this study is whether there is any difference between the vowels inserted in the underlying onset clusters, bracket CC, and underlying coda cluster CC bracket, and underlying vowels that exist in otherwise identical phonological contexts, bracket CVC and CVC bracket. So if Balak's proposal is correct, we predict that epenthetic vowel in coda clusters should be similar to the vowels in the other conditions. I mean, by the other conditions, bracket CVC and CVC bracket. And the vowel inserted in onset cluster is intrusive vowels and should be more like a schwa vowel. These intrusive vowels would also be more susceptible to not being inserted. I mean the vowel in the onset cluster, underlying onset cluster, and to acoustic influence from surrounding consonants. To investigate this issue, we measured the frequency of occurrence of the vowel in all of these conditions mentioned, underlying onset, underlying coda, and bracket CVC and CVC bracket. We also measured the quality, which is F1 and F2. F1 indicates the height of the vowel. F2 indicates the backness and frontness of the vowel. We also measured the duration of these vowels in mentioned conditions. So this study, in this study, we recorded 2 male speaker and 2 female speaker of Turkish with knowledge of English. Also, all the participants speak standard Turkish or standard-like dialect of Turkish, and their age is between 20 and 35 years old. The stimuli included target words with bracket CC and CC bracket and bracket CVC and CVC bracket conditions. The bracket CC and CC bracket stimuli were all words with an E vowel inserted in them. We predicted this vowel, the E vowel, to be the inserted vowel in these conditions. So the bracket CVC and CVC bracket stimuli had an underlying E vowel, as we said, and there were 4 consonantal contacts. So BR, DR, KL, and KR, these are the clusters that we are testing in our study, for which the stimuli matching all contacts that used.
Okay, the stimuli were embedded in carrier sentences. Hassan kelimesini yazdı, meaning Hassan wrote the word, blah blah blah. So, and along with these carrier sentences, we also included some filler sentences, and all sentences were randomized and repeated twice. Recording were made using smartphone in a quite informal setting, and the randomized stimuli were presented on several sheets of paper in large print, and the participants were asked to read the sentences in a colloquial way to avoid influence from any, formal speech styles. We analyzed the recording using the Pratt and recorded a series of measurements. These included whether each vowel was uttered or not, and the duration, and F1 and F2 measurements of vowel that were uttered. Format measurements were taken at the vowel midpoints in order to compare inserted and underlying E with other vowels qualities. Some reference vowels were extracted from non-target words and measured as well. for each speaker, the F1 and F2 in 8 instances of the second E in kelimesini and 8 instances of I in yazdı were measured as well. The E provides a vowel of different height than I, and the I provides a vowel of a different backness than I. So results here in this graphs shows the frequency of occurrence of the vowels in each context. The two underlying contexts, bracket CVC and CVC bracket, have 100% vowel occurrence for all participants as expected. Vowels were also inserted in coda clusters 100% of time for all participants. In onset clusters, there is variation. Only one participant inserted vowels in 100% of times, and one speaker inserted vowels in only 5 of the 8 words. The words where vowels were not inserted between onset consonants were clip 3 times, creme 2 times, and bread. So each column, as you can see, represent each participants and the environments, yep, as you can see. And the first environment, bracket CC, as you can see, shows some variations in terms of occurrence. Only the second participant pronounced E in onset cluster 100% of times. And formant values. This graph shows the frequency of occurrence of the vowels in each context. The two underlying contexts, bracket CVC and CVC bracket, have 100% vowel occurrence for all participants, as expected. Vowels were inserted in coda clusters 100% of time for all participants. Okay. Sorry. So here we see the participant vowel formats. This graph shows the format measurements for the first and second participants. The ovals are centered at the average F1 and F2 vowels for each condition, and the height and the width of the oval represent the standard deviation from the mean for F1 and F2 respectively. Dark blue ovals show the formant measurements for underlying vowels, and the light blue ovals show the formant measurements for inserted vowels. Green ovals show the format measurement for the reference vowels. So as you see these ovals, the bottom and the top part shows the F1 value range, and then these 2 points shows the F1 value of the vowels. And as you can see, bracket CC, the vowel that occurs in bracket CC diverge from other group of vowels, from other group of E vowels. It's hanging there. Okay. And as for the third and fourth participants, for the third and fourth participants, the measured vowel space is similar, except that the vowels in bracket CC context overlap a little bit with the other high front vowels. As you can see, it's overlapping with other 3 vowels, but still it's kind of diverging from them. And vowel durations. This graph shows box plots of duration measurements for each context. The boxes stretch from the first to the third quartile with a median line in the middle. The whiskers show the range of the data. As can be seen in the graphs, vowels inserted in CC bracket context are indistinguishable from underlying vowels in terms of their duration. However, vowels inserted in bracket CC context have a much lower median and a much lower upper range than all other vowels. In other words, they are much shorter on average than all other vowels. And as for third participant and fourth participants, the patterns noted for the first and second participants hold for the third participant, but is not as clear for the fourth participant. Actually, fourth participants' vowel duration kind of surprised us a little bit. Anyway, in general, then vowels inserted in onset clusters are much shorter on average than underlying and coda inserted vowels, and vowels inserted in coda cluster are indistinguishable from underlying vowels in terms of duration.
So this study finds that vowels in bracket CC condition have variable frequency of occurrence, schwa-like quality, and shorter duration than vowels in other conditions. Vowels in other condition are pronounced 100% of the time, while vowel in underlying onset cluster pronounced 70% of the time. The F1 of these inserted vowels in onset cluster, in the underlying onset cluster, is like either E or depending on the speaker, but its F2 is always back than E. It's always between E and So as we saw in the graph about the vowel qualities, so F1 in general has a higher value in the number, so means that the vowel is lower than the E vowels, and F2 has a lower value in F2, lower value, which means the vowel is always backer than the front high E. And the range, with regard of the range of the occurrence and the duration of these vowels, the longest vowel in onset, underlying onset cluster is less than the average vowel in other conditions. So the variation in frequency of use of vowel in bracket CC condition, its schwa-like quality and its shorter duration all supports that all supports the view that it has no articulatory target. So the vowel in onset underlying onset cluster, it's not treated like the vowel in underlying coda cluster. That underlying coda cluster vowel, epenthetic vowel, has an articulatory target. We further conclude that in onset cluster condition in Turkish, this intrusive vowel is an epenthetic, is a phonetic, it's a phonological specified, but the epenthetic vowel in coda, so it's not the phonological specified, sorry, the vowel in onset cluster is not phonological specified, but the vowel in coda is phonologically specified. And it's only uttered, I mean the vowel in onset cluster, as phonetically necessary, meaning that it is an intrusive vowel on the level of phonetics, as we said, and not an epenthetic vowel on the level of phonology. As a conclusion, the vowel inserted in bracket CC condition behave differently than the vowel inserted in CC bracket condition. Inserted vowels in bracket CC condition appear to lack an articulatory target, while inserted vowel in CC bracket condition appear to have a phonological presence. This supports Bullock's 2016 proposal that bracket CC intrusion or insertion is a phonetic intrusion, and the CC bracket insertion is a phonological epenthesis. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. This was a really interesting set of data. My question is about what you said in the early slides, that the vowels in cluster CC are never written, whereas the vowels in CC bracket. How did you call it? Bracket? Yes.
Bracket CC versus CC bracket CC means bracket, like underlying onset cluster and underlying coda cluster.
Right. And so could it have happened that because you presented the materials in writing, the production of the onset vowel was less regular, or somehow less, that the speakers felt they could not say that vowel as much? as if they were speaking in a non-written context. Or that I can't express what I want to say really well. Sorry.
So we're not we're not depending on the orthography, and all the participants are native speakers of Turkish. We're talking about the insertion itself, the insertion process of itself. So in words like fikir, the vowel in between the K and R is present, and you cannot drop it, and this can be realized on the orthography. So after you realize that there is a vowel, you reflect that in the orthography. But with tren, so the vowel is not written. That means that it doesn't have any realization as being a real vowel. It's just, as I said, pronounced phonetically necessary because of the nature of the Turkish speaker. So in Turkish, as we know, Turkish does not allow onset cluster. The phonology of Turkish does not allow onset cluster. So when the Turkish speaker exposed to words like tren and with any other or breath, this vowel will be inserted by the speaker for like ease of production, to make it easy for himself or herself to pronounce these segments.
Actually, we thought about giving these sentences verbally, but we thought maybe while pronouncing these our stimuli to our participants, we may influence their own articulation. Like they may kind of try to imitate how we are doing, or therefore we preferred, right?
There are ways to avoid that from happening. If you want, I can.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
No, yeah, I can hear you, but
Okay.
we can talk later.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I agree with you that they're not written, and that may have an influence because they're not stable. Then,
Yeah.
what I wanted to say is it's really interesting, and actually you're confirming what other people have said on the basis of some other pieces of evidence that the coda consonant clusters, the vowel that you insert is actually lexically specified, because if you insert it, there is no vowel harmonies. For example, in the word vakit, it becomes vakti. The vowel that is inserted is actually not harmonic with the vowel in the first syllable. So that tells you that there's lexical specification. The vowel is the epenthetic, the so-called epenthetic vowel is phonologically specified.
Yeah.
Whereas the onset consonant cluster, the epenthesis there is the emergence of the unmarked, and that vowel is underspecified. But there you have a bit of a problem. I mean, phonetic intrusion is certainly the reason, but I don't think you can explain that if this is purely phonetic. The very fact that, in fact, there's also some sort of vowel harmony going on in the onset position. So if you have the word Bruce, for example, the proper name in English, if you sing the happy birthday song in Turkish for Bruce, you say İki doğdun Bruce, you would have the U vowel actually. So that would so I'm not sure in that case what you would say. You only looked at E and U contexts, right? So there are also contexts that would trigger U, especially if the first consonant is a labial, right? So there, and also.
Yeah, this is like, we didn't show this to the audience, but this is considered as a future work, the surrounding vowel, the surrounding consonant of the intrusive vowel, and also what Clemens and Cesar claimed, that the intrusive vowel also affected by harmony. It's not the case all the time. Otherwise, how we can answer to the insertion in the word like clip? So we found some instances of insertion of the high back vowel instead of E. So the vowel the vowel in the root is E, but the insertion vowel is so it's not being consistent. So it needs like a further expansion of this study.
That's sometimes because of the consonant,
Yeah.
consonant though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that environment, for example, creme, you
Yeah.
would normally think because of A, it should be E, but because of K, which is Wheeler,
Yeah.
so you insert
Yeah.
the back
Yeah.
version.
Yeah.
So sometimes in this context, the consonant also affects vowel harmony.
Yeah,
This is in the future work.
We
so,
acknowledge that, not
Yeah, we-
looking at the influence of consonants
Yeah.
on these vowels is one of the constrictions of our
Yeah.
study, and we leave it for future studies. Yeah.
I mean, just to follow up on what Isabel said, you mentioned that actually these people have knowledge of English, right? And most of the words that you use are actually cognate words. I mean, they're borrowed into Turkish. So I don't know in which setting you ran the experiment, but if I'm sitting in Bloomington, and if I'm presented with these words, I would have more sort of a English faithful pronunciation of these words. Right, so I don't know how much of an English accent these people had, or whether they were having any, first language attrition issues. So did you correlate actually with any of the extra linguistic factors, like the participant characteristics? So the duration of the vowel, frequency of the vowel, with these other variables.
Like their level of English
their
proficiency, for
length of
example?
residence in the United
Yeah.
States, and so on.
Yeah, actually, our participants were like English students studying English here at IU in Bloomington. So like we didn't really look at their English proficiency level, but they were either like, beginner or intermediate.
Yeah,
Not-
generally speaking, they are not very advanced in
Yeah, they're not advanced.
in the English language. Also, surprisingly, we found the epenthetic vowels occurring even they are exposed to English. So, I mean, maybe the phonology in English didn't develop to pronounce the onset cluster.
Good point. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm a little confused about your analysis of CC bracket, right? So I was understanding you to say that you're assuming that the epenthetic vowel is not present in the underlying representation, but I was understanding Barish to say that it was evidence that it is.
Oh, okay.
And I also had the question why, if it's not present in the underlying representation, as the examples like Simiti show or suggest, then why do you get non-harmonic epenthetic vowels
So
in some cases?
So you are asking why we are presenting or why we are doing analysis of CC bracket, the vowel in CC bracket condition, right? Sorry.
No, I'm asking what is your assumption about the underlying representation of CC bracket words? Is right? I was understanding.
Yeah, the assumption is clear here. Maybe it's a little bit confusing, but the assumption is underlying coda cluster realizing the service with phonological epenthetic vowel to break the bad cluster in Turkish, which does not adhere to onset to sonority sequencing principle. So Turkish does not allow horizon sonority in the coda. So because of that, we have epenthetic vowel in CC bracket condition, and we have to study the epenthetic vowels in CC bracket condition and compare it with the epenthetic vowel in onset condition and vowels in CVC bracket and bracket CVC to have the clear image of the quality of this epenthetic vowel in the onset cluster.
I'm sorry, just not answering the question. What determines the quality of the epenthetic vowel?
What determines the quality of the epenthetic vowel? So we measured the F1 in Kalimasini and the back vowel in Yazda, and we are using those as like points, or like you can imagine it as like a landmark. So we're using that to determine the position or the quality of the epenthetic vowel. Where is it from the vowel plot? Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of follow up with Barish's point. So it looks like from the examples we saw, I'm not a Turkish speaker, but from the examples it looks like the onset clusters are all borrowed words.
Yeah.
And we have something similar in Persian happening because we don't have onset clusters either, and we have a epenthetic vowel. But I think there's variation. There's a lot of difference between the kinds of examples you have. So something like kerem, which is the way we would say it in Persian, I think it's lexicalized like that. I mean, speakers probably don't even know that this is really originally from cream. Like, of course, educated speakers do. But then a name like bread is very different. So, I mean, to just put all of these together and sort of look at the variation and kind of, flat out the variation, it's a bit, maybe, it could be a bit deceiving. Whereas the other ones, I think the coda clusters, as Barish said, maybe are lexicalized. So in the same way, some of the initial clusters may be lexicalized, whereas some may not be. And to mix them up, is that a problem or not?
Thanks.
Yeah, so it could be deceiving if the participants are like Turkish people in Turkey, not exposed to English, but all of the participants, they have some knowledge of English, so they know that all of these words like you have borrowed from English.
I'm not sure. If I'm not a Persian speaker, I think I'm a fluent speaker of English, but I would still say kerem. If I wanted to talk about cream in Persian, but I wouldn't say beret if my friend was called bread. I would, in the middle of my Persian speaking, I would say, "Oh, I saw bread." Bread. So I think these should be kind of.
Yeah. This is like this refers to the like word entrenchment. So kerem is very entrenched in your lexicon, or most of the second language speakers' lexicon. But bread is not very common. So we will balance this in the future. But the thing that limited our stimuli, so the limited consonant distribution in Turkish. So the rule is strict in Turkish. The rule of sonor is strict in Turkish. So we couldn't find words. They have the same level of entrenchment, i.e., the same level of the lexical recognition of the speakers. Due to the limited consonant distribution in Turkish.
I have a question concerning klip and krem. Would this prove that there are two different K phonemes in Turkish? I mean, there's kağıt with k, and then there is K, and that in this case it's the K phoneme which is back. Klip is really, they really pronounce with klip, krem.
So you can.
There might be some variations when it comes to the pronunciation of this the consonant.
It really is true. It is klip.
Klip. Yeah. So that's what we try to figure out, by looking at their format measurements to see if it's like more like or e or where it stands, But there's certainly variation when it comes to the articulation of this vowel in onset cluster.
What I think is that it proves there are really two different Ks.
Okay. You are saying the vowel inserted between K and L, it is a back vowel in the environment of front consonants, right? Is it that your question? And sorry. So, as we said, it's not stable. This inserted vowel in the onset, underlying onset cluster, it's not stable. It doesn't have fixed quality like the E vowel inserted in coda cluster. It varies. It varies from the E and it's between this most of the time. And as we said, this is we actually made a slide for this as being one of the future expansion of this study.
So I have a very quick question before we move. So you are comparing final clusters in a parenthetic vowel in final syllable versus an initial syllable, right? So the word final syllable is also the more prominent syllable when it comes to prominence or stress, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
So did you somehow control this and compare the word final, so the word initial, a parenthetic vowel with some other word initial full vowel to see if it differs from that? Of course it's going to differ to some extent from the final vowel also because it's not in the strong position of the word. But did you also compare it to another initial vowel?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. We have the environments like bracket C, CVC and CVC bracket. These vowels are not epenthetic; they are full vowels. They are environment similar or semi-similar to the environment on onset cluster, and also to get, as I said, to get the full image, we compare it with the epenthetic vowel in the coda cluster. So we compared this epenthetic vowel in onset cluster with underlying vowels in conditions like onset and conditions like
in onset position also, right?
Yeah, like for example, you can we have it in the slide, the data slide. So yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.